starved for the truth.
Knowing something and being ready for something are not the same thing. Guys, Disclosure Day, another Spielberg alien blockbuster classic that not only asked questions about the theological implications of aliens, but also asked a more hidden, deeper question that I haven't seen a whole lot of people debating online. To be honest, 2026 hasn't been filled with the most insightful movies. I'm looking at you, Mandalorian and Grogu. But as I've been watching all the debate online, I've noticed that people aren't really focusing on what I think Spielberg was actually intending with Disclosure Day. Because this movie, one, is not about just aliens, and it's definitely not just about religion. I think it's about whether humanity deserves to know the truth. And once I realized that, I couldn't unsee it. Today, we're going to tackle the worldview behind Disclosure Day. Not just whether this movie was good or bad, and not just whether Spielberg handled religion well, but about what it says about Judeo-Christianity, why that matters, and the real message behind it all that people aren't really talking about. So first, let's talk about what Disclosure Day really thought it was talking about. So I don't think that's actually what makes the movie interesting, and I think you would definitely agree with me on that point. The movie spends a whole lot of time debating one central issue. If aliens were real, would people worship the aliens instead of God? One character, a former nun played by Eve Hewson, argues that people will see aliens as deities and stop believing. Another nun pushes back in one of the scenes and said, why would God make such a vast universe, yet save it only for us? And look, that's a perfectly reasonable conversation to have, because Christians have debated that in the past, but I think that discussion has already concluded. We are asking far deeper questions than Spielberg is asking in this movie, which I think left a lot of fans disappointed leaving the theaters. So what are Christians actually talking about in terms of aliens, the universe, and life outside of Earth? If you're new to this channel, this is Cut the Crap. This is where we go deeper than just whether a movie is good or bad. We talk about culture, worldview, morality, and what these movies say about those things. So if you're interested in more content just like this, I would ask that you subscribe to my channel, like this video, share with a friend, watch through to the end. All of these things help people find this video easier and so that the YouTube algorithm will suggest them for you. Speaking of the algorithm, if you could do all those things, that would really help me out as well. Algorithm, if you're watching this, I still dislike you very much. Anyways, moving on. I saw somebody online summarize kind of all the debate around Disclosure Day, and he had a really good thing to say, he or she, on Reddit. Said this: Spielberg is not exactly breaking new ground here. If aliens exist, what would that mean about God is not something that's going to cause people to start walking away from the church in droves. That is a great summary, because if aliens showed up tomorrow, I don't think people would stop believing in God. I think they would just try to figure out how aliens already fit into the grand narrative of humanity. Because honestly, that's where all the fascinating questions begin, not end. That is where Spielberg's Disclosure Day ended. You guys kind of see where I'm coming from. I mean, it would bring up so many different fascinating theological questions, like, do aliens experience sin the same way we do? Do they sin at all? Are they fallen creatures? If they never were affected by sin, do they die or do they not die? And what happens when they come to earth as a result of their perfection meeting us as sinful creatures? Did Christ die for them? If Christ died for us on earth, did he die a second time so that that death not cover everything in the universe, or did it? There are a multitude of questions that we can ask as a result of this film that Spielberg didn't even tap into. The question that he presents is, would aliens disprove God? I don't think that goes deep enough into the actual discussion around aliens today. The questions I just asked are way more interesting than, does aliens really mean that God doesn't exist? I think that question has already been answered to a degree. And again, we go deeper than what most channels are talking about in terms of movies. So stay tuned, we got a lot more to discuss. Because questions like this would definitely make for an interesting sci-fi blockbuster in 2026. Again, you spend tens of millions of dollars on a movie, and this is the best intellectual piece that you can come up with an entire team of intellectuals. Again, I don't want to hate on Spielberg, but I feel like with that many resources, you could definitely pull something better together. And that's where Spielberg drops the ball, because to be honest, I really enjoyed the movie separated from the intellectual piece, but the movie focused on the least interesting part of aliens. And here's where things get a little weird. The movie itself is asking one particular question, but then the imagery itself is pointing towards a completely different one. In fact, if you look at the symbolism in Disclosure Day, you'll actually see that it's arguing against itself. And here's something that most people have already picked up on. This movie preaches Christianity not just in the dialogue, but in the characters, in the aliens, and especially in the plot. Spielberg has always created movies like this. He is Jewish after all, and Disclosure Day is no exception to that. In many ways, this movie feels like a sci-fi reimagining of Judeo-Christianity, and not subtly either. It's everywhere in this plot. Margaret and Daniel function almost like prophets. They've been given this knowledge from the aliens. People even start treating them like religious figures. At one point, Margaret practically rejects somebody from worshiping her. She says, "I don't want to become your religion." And then there's the character Noah, who is a hard-hearted leader, which maybe reminds you of Pharaoh from Exodus. He's too stubborn to let that happen, and he won't admit that he might be wrong. And then you even have this whole scene where Margaret predicts that it's going to hail, guys. That's literally Moses and Aaron as they are giving these signs to Pharaoh to tell him to let his people go. Let the knowledge go. Meanwhile, the whole world sits in a World War III scenario. There's rumors of war, there's fear, there's uncertainty, and that almost feels like a Revelation end times kind of mashup. And Margaret is like a John the Baptist coming to tell them that there is good news coming, that this is going to solve all the problems, that there is one piece that everyone is missing, which in this case would be Christ, which I guess would mean aliens. It's hard not to see the biblical parallels in Disclosure Day. And whether Spielberg intended for all of this to happen is not really the point. The point is that all these symbols lead towards one idea: revelation, truth being disclosed, truth breaking into a world that may not be prepared for it. And this is kind of where I started to realize something. This movie says it's about aliens, it says it's about religion, and the characters think it's about the aliens, but it's actually about something way deeper. It's pointing towards a question that Spielberg never fully asks, but his movie definitely relies on. Should truth always be revealed? Because once you start asking that question, Disclosure Day starts to make a whole lot more sense, and the debate online feels a little irrelevant. This is the heart of the video. Everything else that you've seen up until this point is the setup so that you guys understand where I'm coming from, and so you guys understand the whole debate. You're welcome. Disclosure Day operates on this worldview that most of us rarely challenge, that truth is good, that disclosure is good. The more we know, the better off we are, and honestly, that's a pretty normal assumption in today's culture. As a Gen Zer, I have seen this in my friends, in my family, in my school, in my house. Like, we live in an information age. Secrets are suspicious. Every mystery has a documentary. Authenticity is praised. Every truth tends to come out of someone either on TikTok or on Reddit or through the news if you're unlucky. We basically built our entire culture around the fact that knowledge is automatically good. But is it? Like, think about it in your own life. A child asks a difficult question. Do you always give them the 100% factual truth to that question, even if it might harm them at a young age? If someone is grieving, do you tell them the exact truth about the situation, regardless of what your worldview is? No, you tend to be a lot more gentle, because we as humans intuitively know something very important. Knowing something and being ready for something are not the same thing. And sometimes we tell a lie when we know somebody's not ready to know the truth. So Disclosure Day actually asks a very important question that we need to discuss today. If aliens showed up tomorrow with answers about humanity, about reality, about God, about death and existence in general, would telling the general public be a moral good? Or could some truth actually do more harm than good? Now, to be clear, I'm not arguing that government should cover up things that it doesn't want the people to know. I mean, in this case, I think it's actually a very interesting question, but I do think that they should have given the information to the public instead of gatekeeping it from them. But it's an interesting question about humanity in general. And this is where the movie actually stumbles into a theological implication, again, that Spielberg didn't even intend. And it has to do with Genesis 3. And this is where the movie actually gets more fascinating than it was even before, because it's actually secretly retelling Genesis. And I'm not saying that the government is somehow the devil or anything. That is not my intention at all. I do think that this movie echoes a tension that we see all the way back in Genesis 3. So, come down this rabbit trail with me that is actually relevant, so I guess it's not a rabbit trail. In Genesis in the Bible, the devil is talking to Adam and Eve, and he's not necessarily telling them to disobey God, even though he is. He's saying that God is withholding something from you. This is operating under the assumption that more knowledge equals freedom. And what Adam and Eve wanted was to become like God. They felt like God was keeping things from them, and they were not okay with that. More truth automatically means a better life. And Genesis complicates that idea because that is not necessarily true. Because the moment that Adam and Eve gained the knowledge that they were pursuing, everything changes. The way that they obtained that knowledge was morally evil, even if the act of knowing isn't necessarily bad or good in and of itself. And that's the tension that I see inside of Disclosure Day. This movie assumes that disclosure is morally good and that truth should come out, humanity deserves to know, but then I don't know if that's necessarily always correct. It just assumes that we would say that's correct. Because truth can be real, it can be necessary, it can be important, but humanity's not always ready to know the full truth. In fact, sometimes telling them the truth will do more harm for a society than good, which was what that one character at the beginning of the movie was arguing for, that it would disrupt people's view of God because they're not ready for what that means. She personally, maybe her worldview, was not ready for the existence of aliens. She didn't have a good framework, which I worry a lot of people in society today don't have that as well. And maybe this should stress the importance of us knowing why we know what we know. I mean, personally, I don't think we'll witness the existence of aliens, but if we do, that shouldn't shatter our worldview. That should only affirm it. And honestly, I wish that this conversation had been a little bit more prevalent in Disclosure Day because I think it would have made for a more philosophically interesting movie. Whether Spielberg was intending this or not, I think the conversation about whether truth is actually a moral good for a society is fascinating. And even I don't exactly know where I land on that in general. Situation by situation maybe, but in general, I'm still thinking it through as well. So was Spielberg right in the end? Honestly, maybe. I think humanity still has a right to know that aliens exist and that government shouldn't cover that up. But here's the weird thing. By the end of Disclosure Day, I wasn't thinking about the aliens. I wasn't thinking about Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, any of that. I was thinking about truth and what truth actually should look like for a society and what truth does to a society, either good or bad. Guys, I was thinking about that for days. Honestly, Spielberg, you get the win. You made me think about your movie for days after I went to go see it, so good on you. Because I've been thinking about the one implication. Knowing something and being ready for something are not the same thing. That is exactly the tension that we see in this movie. We assume that more information is always good, that transparency is to be sought after and praised, that knowledge is always better, but is it? Is it really making us better humans, better friends, better family members? Is that always the right way to go? This is a worldview that is assumed in this movie, but isn't always necessarily the right thing to do. And just to be clear, I'm not arguing that people should lie. I'm just arguing that not everyone needs to know the full truth right off the bat. That is not always the most helpful thing for people to experience. Because as a Christian, I don't believe in lying. Lying is a sin. But I do believe that the truth hurts sometimes, and that you need to be aware, be mature in how you present the truth to people who may not be ready to hear it. So this movie asks some fascinating questions. Does everyone deserve to know the truth? Or are some truths dangerous precisely because they're true? That's where this movie argues against itself, because the movie wants to celebrate disclosure, but then it actually brings up why disclosure might not always be the wisest thing. And in this case, I could go either way. I do think that the people deserve to know the truth, but maybe the way that they went about it wasn't necessarily morally good. So what do you guys think? Do you think that humanity deserves to know the truth? Or do you think that I'm just a fool and have no idea what I am saying? I would love to hear what you guys think down in the comments. I'm always down for discussion. I read every single comment and respond to it for the most part, so please let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Ethan Wood. You've been watching Cut the Crap. Until next time.